in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. This phrase has echoed through the Warhammer 40,000 universe for decades, a promise of endless conflict and suffering on a galactic scale. But for some warriors, this eternal war takes on a meaning far more literal and horrifying than any mortal could comprehend. These are the Dreadnoughts, and their existence represents one of the darkest aspects of the Imperium's machinery of war. Imagine, if you will, being trapped inside a walking tomb of adamantium and ceramite. Your body, broken beyond any hope of natural recovery, has been surgically fused with a war machine. You cannot feel the ground beneath your feet because you no longer have feet. You cannot breathe fresh air because your lungs no longer draw breath in any meaningful way. You cannot touch, taste, or smell the world around you. All that remains is your consciousness, sealed within a metal sarcophagus, fed through tubes and wires, kept alive in a bath of cold amniotic fluid. This is not a temporary measure. This is forever. For a space marine interred within a dreadnought, death has been replaced by something far worse, an eternity of service with no possibility of escape. The Imperium calls this an honor, the greatest gift that can be bestowed upon a fallen hero. The chapter masters speak of it as salvation, a chance for the most valorous warriors to continue serving the Emperor even after their mortal forms have failed. But behind the ceremonial words and sacred rituals lies a truth far darker. To become a dreadnought is to be sentenced to a prison of flesh and metal, to watch centuries pass like days, to see everyone and everything you once knew crumble to dust, while you remain unchanging, undying, trapped in an existence that blurs the line between life and death, until neither word holds any meaning. The Dreadnoughts are walking contradictions. They are revered as living saints, embodiments of the chapter's history and tradition, yet they are also objects of pity and fear. They are powerful beyond measure, capable of tearing through enemy lines like tissue paper, yet they are helpless, dependent on tech marines to maintain their systems and awaken them from their endless sleep. They are immortal, yet they are also the most tragic figures in an already tragic universe. Each one carries within them the memory of what it was to be human, to be flesh and blood, to feel the simple pleasures and pains of existence. And each day of their eternal service takes them one step further from that memory, until nothing remains but a consciousness that cannot remember what it means to be alive. This is the reality of the Dreadnought, not the glorious tales told in the chapter halls, not the heroic legends painted on banners and carved into monuments, but the day-to-day existence of a being caught between life and death, forced to serve for centuries, for millennia, with no hope of release except destruction in battle. Some last for 10,000 years, like the legendary Bjorn the Fell-Handed, witnessing the passage of ages while trapped in their metal shells. Others descend into madness within decades, their minds unable to cope with the isolation and the loss of their humanity. What follows is an exploration of that existence. We will walk through the transformation from Space Marine to Dreadnought, experience the slow erosion of self over centuries of service, and understand why, in the grim darkness of the far future, even the greatest honors can be the cruelest punishments. The moment everything changes, the battlefield of the 41st Millennium is a place of absolute horror. Bolt shells explode with the force of grenades, turning armored warriors into mist and shattered ceramite. Plasma weapons unleash miniature suns that melt through battle tanks. Chainsaws scream as they bite into flesh and bone. Even Space Marines, humanity's finest warriors, genetically enhanced and clad in power armor that can shrug off rounds that would destroy lesser soldiers, are not invincible. They fall, they die, and sometimes they suffer fates worse than death. For most Space Marines, mortal injury on the battlefield means a quick end. The apothecaries rush to fallen brothers, but their primary mission is not salvation, but harvest. They extract the gene seed, the precious biological heritage that will create the next generation of warriors. The fallen Marine receives the Emperor's piece, a bolt round to the head to ensure his suffering ends quickly, and his gene seed remains uncorrupted. It is a mercy, a warrior's death, an end to service in glory and honor. But for a select few, a different fate awaits. When a chapter's leadership witnesses a warrior of exceptional skill, wisdom, or valor fall in battle, when they deem that this brother's knowledge is too valuable to lose, when they decide that the Imperium cannot afford to let this warrior rest, the apothecaries do not deliver the Emperor's peace. Instead, they begin a different protocol, one that will transform the dying warrior into something that is neither fully alive nor truly dead. Picture the scene. A captain of the Adeptus Astartes lies broken on a battlefield of ash and bone. An orc warboss's power claw has torn through his power armor like paper, crushing his spine, pulping his internal organs, shattering bones that were already stronger than steel. By any reasonable measure, he should be dead. His enhanced physiology, his third lung, his secondary heart, the remarkable resilience bred into him through gene seed and surgical enhancement. None of it is enough. He is dying, and he knows it. Perhaps there is relief in this knowledge. He has served for 2 centuries. He has led his brothers to victory on 100 worlds. He has earned his rest. But the relief is short-lived. The chief apothecary kneels beside him, and the words he speaks are not prayers for the dead. Instead, he speaks of duty, of service, of the chapter's need for care. Veterans who have seen what this captain has seen, fought what he has fought, learned what he has learned. The captain tries to protest, but his voice is barely a whisper, blood bubbling in what remains of his throat. The decision has already been made. He has been chosen for the honor of internment. He will become one of the ancients, a dreadnought, a walking embodiment of the chapter's history and might. The journey to the fortress monastery is a blur of pain and sedation. The captain drifts in and out of consciousness, aware only of being moved, of machines beeping, of tech marines murmuring the canticles of preservation. He does not remember arriving in the sacred halls where the chapter's dreadnoughts sleep away the centuries. He does not remember being taken to the preparation chamber. His next clear memory is waking on a surgical table, surrounded by robed figures who are no longer entirely human themselves. The surgery to implant a space marine into a dreadnought sarcophagus is not a clean, precise medical procedure. It is butchery, elevated to ritual, a horrific transformation that would kill any being less resilient than a space marine. The tech marines who perform the operation work with the cold efficiency of men who view flesh as simply another form of machinery to be repaired, replaced, or repurposed. What remains of the captain's body is systematically stripped away. Limbs are removed, they serve no purpose now, and their presence would only complicate the integration process. Organs that are no longer necessary are extracted or allowed to atrophy. The spine is fused with neural interface ports. The brain is wired directly into a mind impulse unit that will allow consciousness to control the dreadnought's systems, as naturally as it once controlled muscles and sinew. Throughout this process, the Space Marine remains conscious. The pain suppressants can only do so much, and the Tech Marines consider it important that the warrior witnesses his own transformation, that he understands what is being done and why. This is not mercy, this is doctrine. The chapter's leadership believes that a warrior who has chosen this path, who has accepted this sacrifice, will be stronger, more dedicated, more capable of enduring the centuries ahead. But the captain did not choose this. Few do, when given the choice. The decision was made for him by others who will never know what it means to be sealed inside a metal tomb for eternity. And as the surgery continues, as more and more of his body is stripped away and replaced with cold machinery, as neural connections are forcibly established between his brain and systems that feel alien and wrong, he begins to understand the magnitude of what has been done to him. The final stage of the process is the most traumatic. What little remains of the captain's body, a torso, a brain, essential organs kept functioning by artificial means, is lowered into the sarcophagus. The amniotic fluid floods in, cold and viscous, filling his lungs in a parody of drowning. His eyes, no longer needed, are sealed shut or removed entirely. In their place, optical sensors feed data directly into his visual cortex. His ears hear nothing but the hum of machinery and the rhythmic pulse of life support systems. The sarcophagus seals with a hiss of pressurizing atmosphere, and then there is darkness. For a moment, there is nothing. No sensation, no input, just the captain's consciousness floating in a void of sensory deprivation. Then, slowly, systems begin to come online. The Mind Impulse unit establishes its connection, translating neural commands into mechanical responses. Optical feeds activate, showing the interior of the preparation chamber through eyes that are no longer eyes, but cameras and targeting arrays. Audio receptors pick up the murmured prayers of the tech marines, but the sound is filtered through processors that strip away warmth and nuance, leaving only data. The chaplain approaches, his skull-faced helm looming large in the captain's new vision. His voice, when it comes through the Vox speakers, seems to echo from a great distance, mechanical and hollow. "Brother Captain, you have been chosen for the highest honor. Your service to the Emperor continues. You are reborn in iron and adamantium. You are Dreadnought." The word falls upon the newly interred warrior like a death sentence. In the chapter's legends, the Dreadnoughts are heroes, unstoppable engines of war, living links to the chapter's glorious past. But those legends were written by those who have never spent a single moment trapped inside a metal shell, cut off from every sensation that makes life worth living. The captain tries to speak, to protest, to beg for the Emperor's peace that was denied to him on the battlefield. What emerges from the Dreadnought's Vox speakers is a harsh, grinding rasp that barely resembles his former voice. "What have you done to me?" The chaplain's response is rehearsed, ritualistic, devoid of any acknowledgement of the horror implicit in the question. "We have saved you, brother. Your body was broken beyond the arts of our apothecaries, but your spirit burns too bright to be lost. You are reborn. You will serve the Emperor for centuries to come, your wisdom guiding future generations, your strength turning the tide of battles yet to be fought." But the newly made Dreadnought knows the truth now, understands it with a clarity that cuts through the fog of pain and disorientation. This is not salvation, this is imprisonment. And unlike any other prison, there is no possibility of escape, no hope of parole, no chance of release, except destruction in battle. The sentence has been passed, and it is life. The prison of flesh and metal. To understand the horror of the Dreadnought's existence, one must first understand the nature of their prison. The sarcophagus is not a simple life support system or a cockpit in which a pilot sits. It is a coffin, a tomb, a sensory deprivation chamber from which there is no exit. Inside this metal womb, sealed away from the world, floats what little remains of a once mighty space marine warrior. The internment process leaves behind a grotesque mockery of the human form. The Dreadnought pilot is no longer a whole being, but a collection of essential components kept alive by machinery. Imagine your body reduced to its most basic elements: brain, essential organs, a torso to house them, all of it atrophied and withered from lack of use. The limbs that once wielded chainsaws and bolters are gone, amputated and discarded. The legs that carried the warrior across 100 battlefields have been removed. Even the eyes, those windows to the soul that allowed him to see the sky and the stars and the faces of his brothers, have been taken away or permanently sealed shut. What remains floats in amniotic fluid, a specially formulated solution designed to preserve flesh indefinitely. This fluid is cold, clinically so, lacking any of the warmth that blood once carried through living veins. It fills the lungs, which no longer breathe air, but instead extract oxygen directly from the solution through membranes that are more machine than biology. The sensation, for those first hours after internment, is suffocating, a constant drowning that the mind screams against even as the enhanced physiology adapts to this new and terrible reality. Tubes and cables penetrate the body at dozens of points. Nutrient feeds pump sustenance directly into what remains of the digestive system, bypassing the mouth that no longer tastes, the tongue that no longer speaks in any natural way. Waste products are efficiently extracted and processed. Neural interface cables burrow deep into the spine and brainstem, establishing connections that allow consciousness to flow into the Dreadnought systems. These connections are not gentle, they are invasive, forcing the brain to interpret signals it was never designed to receive, translating thoughts into mechanical commands through a process that, in the early days, feels like forcing square pegs into round holes. The worst part, perhaps, is the sensory deprivation. Human consciousness evolved to process constant input from the physical world. Touch, temperature, pressure, pain. These are not merely sensations, but fundamental aspects of how we understand our place in reality. A space marine's senses are even more acute than those of baseline humans, enhanced to detect threats and opportunities that lesser beings would miss. To have all of that stripped away, to be plunged into a void where none of those signals exist anymore, is a form of torture that breaks minds far stronger than those of ordinary men. When a Dreadnought's systems are active, the pilot receives input, but it is not the same as sensation. Optical feeds provide vision, but it is the vision of a machine, flat and processed, measuring ranges and identifying heat signatures rather than seeing color and light and shadow the way human eyes do. Audio receptors pick up sound, but it arrives as data, frequencies, and decibel levels, rather than the rich texture of a voice or the subtle whisper of wind through trees. The Dreadnought can detect pressure and impact through its hull sensors, but this is not touch. It is information, cold and analytical, telling the pilot that his armor has been struck, but conveying none of the visceral reality of what that means. And when the systems are inactive, when the Dreadnought is powered down or placed in stasis, there is nothing at all, just consciousness floating in darkness, aware but receiving no input, trapped in a sensory void that drives some pilots to madness within their first year of service. The tech marines call this state rest, but it is nothing like sleep. There are no dreams in the Dreadnought's slumber, no REM cycles or processing of the day's experiences. There is only the void and the terrible awareness of self suspended in it, counting the seconds and the minutes and the hours until either activation or final madness. The physical decay that occurs within the sarcophagus is gradual but inevitable. Without use, without the constant stress and repair that keeps living tissue viable, the body atrophies. Muscles waste away to nothing, no longer needed to move limbs that do not exist. Bones become brittle, their calcium leached away by a system that no longer requires structural support. Skin grows thin and pale, deprived of sunlight and air, developing lesions that heal slowly, if at all. Organs begin to fail, one by one, and are replaced with mechanical substitutes or simply removed if they serve no essential function. Over the decades and centuries, what remains of the original Space Marine becomes less and less recognizable as anything that was once human. The torso shrivels, organs compressed and rearranged to fit within the smallest possible space. The brain itself may shrink slightly as neural pathways that were once used for controlling a body are repurposed for interfacing with machinery. The face, if it still exists, becomes a mask of decay, features sunken and distorted by the constant immersion in amniotic fluid. Tech Marines who maintain the Dreadnoughts sometimes report their horror at what they find when a sarcophagus must be opened for repairs. The being inside bears little resemblance to the proud Space Marine who was interred centuries or millennia ago. It is a thing of tubes and wires, of withered flesh and mechanical augmentation, sustained by machines that have become more integral to its survival than any biological system. Some tech marines, particularly those new to their duties, require counseling after their first exposure to the interior of an ancient dreadnought's sarcophagus. The sight challenges their understanding of what their chapter's heroes have become, forcing them to confront the reality that the honor they aspire to achieve may be a fate worse than any death. The sarcophagus itself is a marvel of technology from ages past, incorporating systems and techniques that the modern Imperium struggles to replicate. The exact mechanisms by which it sustains life for centuries, how it prevents infection and decay, how it maintains the neural connections that allow consciousness to control a machine, these are mysteries wrapped in ritual and superstition. The tech priests who oversee the creation of new sarcophagi work from ancient templates, following procedures they do not fully understand, praying to the machine god that each component will function as intended. This makes each dreadnought irreplaceable. When the sarcophagus fails, when age and wear finally overcome even the most careful maintenance, there is no way to transfer the pilot to a new shell. Death comes not from enemy fire, but from mechanical failure, from a pump that stops circulating fluid, or a seal that finally gives way after 10,000 years of constant pressure. The pilot, aware of his system's gradual degradation, can only wait, hoping that death in battle comes before the slow suffocation of life support failure. The interior of the sarcophagus is pitch black, lit only by the occasional flicker of status lights that the pilot cannot see with eyes that no longer exist. The walls are close, pressing in from all sides, a constant reminder of confinement. There is no room to move, no space to stretch limbs that have long since been removed. The pilot exists in this cramped darkness, this wet tomb, feeling the cold fluid against skin that has forgotten the warmth of sunlight, breathing liquid instead of air, aware with every moment that this is now the totality of physical existence. Some pilots report that, over time, they cease to think of the sarcophagus as a prison and begin to think of it as their body. The dreadnought's hull becomes their skin, its weapons their hands, its sensors their eyes and ears. This psychological adaptation is necessary for maintaining sanity, a coping mechanism that allows consciousness to accept its new reality. But it comes at a cost. To think of the dreadnought as self is to forget what it was to be human, to let go of the memories of flesh and sensation and freedom. It is a small death, a surrender of identity that happens so gradually that most pilots do not realize it is occurring until they wake one day and cannot remember what their own face looked like, what their voice sounded like before it was processed through Vox speakers, what it felt like to walk on two legs across soil and stone. This is the physical reality of the dreadnought's existence, a consciousness trapped in a metal shell, sustained by machines, cut off from every sensation that makes life meaningful. It is a prison more absolute than any dungeon, a sensory deprivation chamber from which there is no escape. And this is what the Imperium calls an honor, a reward for service, a gift to its greatest heroes. The first century, learning to be dead. The first century of service as a dreadnought is a period of adjustment, a time when the newly interred warrior must come to terms with what has been done to him and what his existence will be from this point forward. For some, this adjustment comes relatively easily. These are the warriors who were already old when they were interred, who had seen enough of war and death that the prospect of continuing service held more appeal than the alternative. They accept their fate, adapt to their new form, and find meaning in their continued ability to serve the Emperor and their chapter. But for others, for those who were young when they fell, who had not yet wearied of life and battle, who still had dreams and ambitions beyond the endless grinding of war, the first century is a nightmare of psychological torment. They rage against their imprisonment, testing the limits of their new form, searching desperately for some way to escape the metal shell that has become their eternal cage. The Vox speakers of the Fortress Monastery's dreadnought chambers sometimes echo with screams of fury and despair, the newly made ancients venting their anguish in voices that no longer sound human. The first battles as a dreadnought are disorienting experiences. Everything about combat has changed. The Space Marine, who once felt the recoil of a bolter in his hands, who gauged distance and trajectory through instinct, born of decades of experience, now fights through layers of mechanical intermediation. When the Dreadnought's assault cannon fires, there is no kick against a shoulder, no smell of propellant, no heat of discharge. There is only data, targeting solutions projected onto optical feeds, ammunition counters ticking down, threat assessments updating in real time. Movement, too, has changed. A Space Marine's power armor responds to thought and muscle, enhancing natural motion to superhuman levels. But a Dreadnought moves through pure thought, neural commands translated into hydraulic actuations and servo-motor responses. The first steps feel clumsy, unnatural, like learning to walk all over again, but without legs, without feet, without any of the proprioceptive feedback that tells a person where their body is in space. In one early deployment, the newly interred captain finds himself on a battlefield he would have recognized in his former life. Orcs, thousands of them, charging across broken ground with their crude weapons held high. In his mind, he knows the tactics, the optimal firing solutions, the weak points in their ragged battle lines. But when he tries to execute those tactics, his new body responds differently than expected. The Dreadnought lurches forward when he intended a careful advance. His assault cannon swings wide of its target as he overcompensates for mechanical response times that are just slightly slower than the neural impulses commanding them. A younger Space Marine might have panicked, but the captain had 2 centuries of combat experience before his internment, and that experience serves him now. He adjusts, recalibrates his expectations, learns to anticipate the lag between thought and action. By the end of the engagement, he is moving more smoothly, his targeting more accurate, his positioning more deliberate. He crushes orc bodies beneath feet that are no longer his, feeling the impacts as vibrations transmitted through his hull, rather than the crunch of bone and armor that he once would have experienced. He wins the battle, his firepower overwhelming the Xenos horde. But there is no satisfaction in the victory, no rush of triumph that would have once accompanied such a feat. As the decades pass, the captain becomes more proficient with his new form. He learns to read the data streams that replace sensory input, to interpret threat indicators and targeting solutions as naturally as he once read the battlefield with his own eyes. He learns the rhythm of his Dreadnought's movements, the optimal firing solutions for his weapons, the tactical applications of his massive size and strength. In battle, he becomes effective, even deadly, a walking fortress that enemies fear to approach. But effectiveness in combat is not the same as acceptance of his fate. Between battles, when he is returned to the sacred halls where the chapter's dreadnoughts rest, he has time to think, to remember, to dwell on everything that has been taken from him. He watches his former battle brothers return from missions, hears them speak of the campaign, sees them gather in the chapter's halls to share stories and break bread together. He cannot join them. His place is no longer among the living, but neither is it with the truly dead. He exists in a liminal space, revered but apart, honored but isolated. The worst moments come when he learns of deaths among his former company. Brothers who served under his command, warriors he trained and fought beside, begin to fall in battle. The first loss hits him like a physical blow. A young sergeant, barely a century old, killed by a Chaos Space Marine's power weapon during a boarding action. The captain had known this sergeant since he was a scout, had watched him grow into a capable leader, had recommended him for promotion. And now he is gone, granted the Emperor's peace, his gene seed harvested for future generations. The captain mourns, but his mourning is private, internal, expressed only through the flicker of his optical sensors and the slight dimming of his power core. He cannot weep. He has no tears. He cannot attend the funeral rites with the rest of the company. His place during such ceremonies is to stand silent vigil in the background, a reminder of the chapter's history and continuity, but not a participant in the living community of warriors. More deaths follow. The company's veterans begin to age, their enhanced physiology eventually succumbing to the accumulated damage of centuries of warfare. Some die gloriously, going out in blazes of violence that their battle brothers will remember and celebrate. Others simply grow slower, weaker, their reactions dulling until they make the one mistake that no amount of gene enhancement can forgive. The captain watches them all pass, each death another connection to his former life severed, another reminder that time moves differently for him now. The young recruits who joined the chapter in these decades never knew him as a flesh and blood warrior. To them, he has always been the ancient, a dreadnought whose service predates their own existence. They treat him with reverence, speaking to him in formal, ritualistic language, asking him to recount battles and campaigns from before they were born. But there is a distance in their interactions, a fundamental disconnect between the living and the entombed. They cannot understand what it means to have been as they are, to have walked and breathed and felt as they do, and then to have all of that taken away. The captain tries to bridge this gap, to offer wisdom and counsel drawn from his centuries of experience. He speaks to them of tactics and strategy, of the enemies they will face and the challenges ahead. But even as he speaks, he can see in their eyes that they view him as something other than one of them. He is a relic, a piece of the chapter's history given voice, valuable for what he knows, but fundamentally separate from the community of warriors to which he once belonged. After 50 years of service as a dreadnought, the captain begins to notice changes in himself that have nothing to do with mechanical proficiency. His memories of life before internment are becoming less vivid, details fading like old photographs exposed to too much light. He can still remember the broad strokes of his service, the campaigns he fought, the victories he achieved, the enemies he faced. But the small things, the personal moments that gave life its texture and meaning, are slipping away. He struggles to recall the face of his first squad leader, the Space Marine who trained him when he was still a scout. He knows the name, can recite the battle honors, but the face itself is gone, replaced by a vague sense of memory without detail. He tries to remember what food tasted like, what wine felt like going down his throat during the rare feast days when the chapter celebrated its victories. But taste is a sensation mediated by tongue and palate, and he no longer possesses either. The memory of flavor has nowhere to anchor itself, nothing to reference, and so it fades into abstraction and then into nothing. Even more disturbing is the way his sense of time begins to distort. The decades between battles blur together, moments of activity separated by long periods of stasis sleep that leave no mark on memory. He knows intellectually that 50 years have passed since his internment, can count the campaigns and deployments that mark the passage of time. But it does not feel like 50 years. It feels like months, perhaps a year, with strange gaps that his mind cannot quite account for. This temporal distortion is dyschronometria, a well-documented effect of extended dreadnought service. The human brain evolved to mark time through the regular cycles of day and night, through the rhythms of bodily needs and sensory experiences. But in stasis, there are no days or nights, no hunger or thirst or fatigue to mark the hours. Time becomes an abstraction, something measured by external markers rather than internal experience. And when those external markers are battles separated by decades of sleep, the mind's normal sense of temporal flow breaks down entirely. The captain finds himself uncertain whether a conversation he remembers having with the chapter master occurred last month or last decade. Events jumble together, out of sequence, until he can no longer reliably construct a narrative of his own existence. He begins keeping verbal logs, recording his thoughts and experiences after each awakening, trying to maintain some sense of continuity. But even this becomes difficult as the decades pass and the logs accumulate, hundreds of hours of recordings that he no longer has time to review before being sent into battle again. At the 75-year mark, something breaks inside him. It happens during a routine activation, Nothing unusual about the circumstances. The tech marines perform their rituals, the life support systems cycle up, consciousness returns. But when the captain tries to speak, to acknowledge his awakening with the traditional response, he finds that he cannot remember the words. They are gone, simply vanished from memory, along with pieces of the catechisms he had memorized as a neophyte, fragments of the chapter's history that he had once known by heart. Panic sets in, a sensation made all the worse by his inability to express it physically. He cannot hyperventilate, cannot feel his heart racing, cannot experience any of the normal physiological responses to fear. The panic exists purely as thought, as consciousness realizing its own deterioration, and it feeds on itself, spiraling into something close to madness. A chaplain is summoned. The skull-faced priest stands before the Dreadnought, speaking words of reassurance that sound hollow and ritualistic. The flesh is weak, but the machine endures. What is lost in memory is gained in purpose. You serve the Emperor still, Ancient. That is what matters. But to the captain, trapped in his metal shell with pieces of his identity crumbling away, it does not feel like what matters. It feels like dying by degrees, consciousness eroding like a statue worn down by centuries of wind and rain. He wants to scream, to rage, to demand that they give him the Emperor's peace and let him truly die rather than continue this slow dissolution of self. But he says none of this. Instead, he recites the catechisms the chaplain provides, committing them to memory again, trying to convince himself that this is a temporary setback rather than a preview of the centuries to come. The first century as a dreadnought teaches the captain a fundamental truth about his new existence. This is not life, and it is not death, but something in between. A purgatory where he is allowed neither the pleasures of living nor the peace of dying. He serves because that is what he was made to do, because his chapter needs what experience and knowledge he still possesses. But the cost of that service is paid in pieces of himself, in memories that fade and connections that sever, and the slow, inexorable loss of everything that once made him who he was. By the end of the first century, the captain has accepted that he will never leave his metal prison, that this is his existence until enemy fire finally destroys him or his sarcophagus fails. But acceptance is not the same as peace. It is simply the recognition that struggling against an inescapable fate serves no purpose. He will endure, because endurance is all that remains to him. And in the centuries to come, he will learn that 100 years of service is nothing. Barely the opening chapter in a story that may stretch across millennia. The stasis sleep, where time goes to die. Between battles, when the Imperium's endless wars have no immediate need for their particular expertise, dreadnoughts are returned to the sacred chambers deep within their chapter's fortress monastery. These halls are shrines, sepulchres, mausoleums, where the chapter's most ancient warriors sleep away the decades and centuries in a state that approximates death more closely than life. To enter these chambers is to walk among the honored dead who refuse to die, to stand in the presence of heroes whose service has extended far beyond any mortal span. The stasis sleep of a dreadnought is not like the sleep of living beings. There are no dreams, no processing of experiences, no cycles of consciousness that mark the passage of hours. Instead, there is a void, an absence so complete that when consciousness returns, the pilot often cannot remember having slept at all. Subjectively, it is as if one moment they were standing in the armory being deactivated, and the next they are awakening to the chants of tech marines, with no awareness that decades or even centuries have passed in between. The process of entering stasis is itself a ritual, performed with the same reverence that other religions might reserve for funeral rites. The dreadnought is escorted to its assigned alcove in the sepulchre, a space that has been prepared and sanctified by the chapter's chaplains and tech priests. Incense burns, filling the chamber with smoke that the dreadnought's sensors detect as particulate matter but cannot smell. Prayers are spoken, ancient words from the earliest days of the chapter, invoking the Emperor's protection and the machine god's blessing. The Dreadnought takes its position, magnetic locks engaging to hold it secure. Power cables are attached, not to provide energy, but to drain it, reducing the sarcophagus's systems to minimal activity. The pilot can feel this happening, consciousness beginning to dim as less and less energy flows to the brain and the neural interface. It is frightening, this sensation of fading, like drowning in slow motion. The pilot wants to fight against it, to demand that the systems remain active, but resistance is futile. The shutdown sequence is controlled externally, beyond any override the pilot might attempt. A chaplain approaches, placing one gauntleted hand against the Dreadnought's hull. His voice is the last thing the pilot hears before the void claims him. "Sleep well, Ancient. The Emperor watches over you. When you wake, it shall be to war in his name once more." Then darkness. Not the darkness of closed eyes or a lightless room, but the absolute absence of any sensation whatsoever. No sight, no sound, no awareness of the passage of time. Consciousness simply ceases, suspended in a state that is neither true sleep nor true wakefulness, but something else entirely. A technological preservation that the Mechanicus can achieve, but never truly explain. What happens during this stasis is known only to the machine god and the most learned tech priests. The sarcophagus's life support systems continue functioning, but at drastically reduced levels. Neural activity in the pilot's brain slows to a crawl, synapses firing at intervals measured in minutes rather than milliseconds. Metabolic processes that normally sustain the body's remaining organic components are throttled down to the bare minimum necessary to prevent decay. The pilot exists in this state, technically alive, but functionally inert. A consciousness in suspension, waiting for the moment when it will be needed again. The duration of stasis varies wildly depending on the chapter's needs and traditions. Some chapters wake their ancients regularly, consulting them for wisdom even when no battle demands their presence. Others wake them only in times of dire need, believing that the less time a Dreadnought spends conscious, the longer its sanity will endure. The legendary Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves, oldest of all living Dreadnoughts, is awakened only once per millennium, except in circumstances of extreme necessity. This means that when Bjorn wakes, he experiences the passage of time in 1,000-year increments, each awakening revealing a galaxy that has changed beyond recognition while he slumbered. The awakening process is as ritualized as the shutdown. Tech Marines gather around the dormant Dreadnought, chanting the litanies of awakening while performing the mechanical procedures that will restore it to full function. Power flows back into the sarcophagus, systems activating in carefully orchestrated sequence. Life support levels increase, pushing more oxygen into the amniotic fluid, stimulating neural activity, coaxing consciousness back from the void where it has been suspended. For the pilot, awakening is a jarring, disorienting experience. There is no gradual return to awareness, no slow emergence from sleep as one might experience in a normal body. Instead, there is nothing, and then suddenly there is everything. Sensory feeds activating all at once, systems coming online and demanding attention, the awareness of self rushing back with all the force of a dam breaking. The first moments of each awakening are marked by confusion. The pilot's last memory is of shutdown, of darkness closing in, of the chaplain's final blessing. But now, there are tech marines gathered around, and they are different tech marines, younger faces, or sometimes no familiar faces at all. The chamber looks the same, but there are subtle differences. New alcoves that were not there before, missing dreadnoughts that once stood vigil, changes that speak of time's passage, even if the pilot has no direct experience of that time. The standard awakening protocol includes a status report delivered by the senior tech marine present. This report serves multiple purposes. It confirms that the Dreadnought systems are functioning properly, establishes the temporal context for the awakening, and provides the pilot with information necessary to reorient themselves in a present that may be very different from the past they remember. Ancient, you have slumbered for 73 years. The Emperor's crusade continues. Your wisdom is required for the campaign against the Xenos threat in the Hadrian sector. 73 years. The number is delivered as simple fact, but its implications are staggering. 73 years have passed in what felt subjectively like an instant. 73 years during which the galaxy turned, empires rose and fell, brothers lived and died, and the Dreadnought experienced none of it. The pilot tries to process this information, to reconcile the disconnect between perceived and actual time, and finds that reconciliation impossible. The mind simply cannot grasp time on this scale when experience provides no framework for understanding. The pilot asks questions, trying to anchor themselves in the present. The chapter master who saw me into stasis, does he still serve? The answer, more often than not, is negative. Chapter masters rarely serve for 70 years, and when they do, it is unusual. More likely, the pilot learns, his chapter master died gloriously in battle 40 years ago, succeeded by a warrior who was barely a neophyte when the Dreadnought last saw service. Brother Sergeant Marcus, my former second-in-command. Where is he now? Dead these past 30 years, killed leading an assault on a chaos stronghold. The pilot remembers Marcus as a young warrior full of potential, and now learns that he lived a full life of service, rose to command his own company, and died a hero's death, all while the pilot slept, unaware and absent. This pattern repeats with every awakening. The Dreadnought asks about people and places it remembers, only to learn that they are gone, changed beyond recognition, or so ancient in their own right that they have become something different from what memory holds. The connections that tie the pilot to their chapter, the personal relationships that give meaning to service, erode with each stasis cycle until the pilot becomes a stranger in what was once their home. Some pilots try to resist this erosion. They demand to be awakened more frequently, arguing that they can still contribute to the chapter's deliberations even when there is no battle to fight. But the tech marines and chaplains who oversee the Dreadnoughts know that consciousness takes a toll. Every hour spent awake is an hour during which the pilot must confront their imprisonment, must feel the weight of their existence, must experience the isolation that comes from being neither fully alive nor truly dead. The stasis sleep, however disorienting, is a mercy of sorts, allowing the centuries to pass without the burden of experiencing every moment. The psychological effects of this temporal displacement are profound and well documented. Dyschronometria, the medical term for the condition, manifests in various ways. Some pilots lose the ability to accurately sequence events, remembering things that happened centuries apart, as if they occurred in rapid succession. Others develop a sense that time itself has become meaningless, that there is no difference between a day and a decade, because both are simply intervals between battles. In extreme cases, pilots begin to experience what the chaplains call temporal dissolution, a state where the boundaries between past, present, and future blur into a single eternal now. These Dreadnoughts speak as if events from their distant past are happening currently, confuse long-dead comrades with living brothers, or believe themselves to still be fighting wars that ended centuries ago. Most chapters recognize this as a sign that the Dreadnought service should end, that the pilot's mind has finally broken under the weight of too many centuries. But putting an ancient to rest is a decision that few chapter masters are willing to make, not when that ancient still functions in battle and contains knowledge that no living member possesses. The stasis chambers themselves are maintained with religious devotion. Tech marines visit daily to anoint the sleeping Dreadnoughts with sacred oils and unguents, to check systems and perform minor maintenance, to ensure that these precious relics remain viable for future battles. The chambers are kept at precisely controlled temperature and humidity, the air filtered and purified to prevent any contamination that might damage the ancient machinery. For the sleeping pilot, none of this care registers as awareness. They do not know about the tech marine who discovered a failing pressure seal and spent 18 hours replacing it to prevent life support failure. They do not hear the prayers spoken over them, do not feel the sacred oils applied to their hull, do not witness the younger space marines who come to pay their respects to the chapter's honored ancients. In stasis, they are as close to death as a living thing can be, preserved in amber, waiting for the moment when the galaxy's wars will have need of them again. But here is the cruelest aspect of the stasis sleep. It does nothing to halt the slow erosion of memory and identity that marks every Dreadnought's service. The pilot's organic brain continues to age, albeit at a dramatically reduced rate. Neural pathways degrade over centuries, old memories fading as the structures that held them deteriorate. Each awakening brings with it the realization that more has been lost, that the person who went into stasis is not quite the same person who emerges. After 500 years of service, with perhaps a dozen awakenings scattered across that span, a Dreadnought pilot may find that they can no longer clearly remember what they looked like before internment. The face they wore for the first century or two of their life has become an abstraction, a general sense of features but no specific details. They know they had hands once, can recall the function of hands, but the actual sensation of fingers and palms, and the ability to manipulate objects with fine motor control. These things have faded beyond recovery. After 1,000 years, entire sections of their pre-internment life may be gone. They might remember their service as a space marine in broad strokes, the chapter they joined, the wars they fought, the rank they achieved. But the personal moments, the friendships and rivalries and small triumphs that gave that service meaning, have been erased by time and the demands of their new existence. Some pilots keep records, storing memories in the Dreadnought's databanks, trying to preserve what organic memory cannot maintain. But these recordings are sterile things, facts without the emotional context that makes memories truly meaningful. The pilot can listen to their own voice recounting an event from centuries past, and know intellectually that it happened to them. But there is no feeling of remembrance, no spark of recognition that would indicate true memory, rather than just information about a stranger who happened to share their name. The stasis sleep, then, serves as both preservation and destruction. It allows the Dreadnought to endure for millennia, extending their service far beyond what would be possible if they remained conscious. But it also fragments their existence into disconnected moments, separated by vast gulfs of unconscious time, making it impossible to maintain the continuous narrative of self that defines human identity. The pilot becomes a collection of snapshots rather than a whole person, each awakening a new beginning with only tenuous connections to all the beginnings that came before. And through it all, the galaxy continues turning. Empires rise and fall, worlds burn and are rebuilt. The Imperium lurches from one crisis to another, each generation of space marines fighting battles that echo those fought by their predecessors. The Dreadnoughts sleep through most of it, awakening only to witness the latest iteration of eternal war, fighting briefly and then returning to the darkness for another century of dreamless suspension. This is the reality of the stasis sleep. It is not rest. It is not peace. It is erasure by degrees, consciousness preserved, but identity slowly dissolving, until what remains is less a person than a collection of combat reflexes and fragmentary memories piloting a war machine. And this process is considered normal, expected, even desirable by a chapter's leadership, because what the Imperium needs from its Dreadnoughts is not their humanity, but their effectiveness in battle. The millennia pass, watching a chapter evolve without you. To serve as a Dreadnought for a millennium or more is to become a witness to history, while simultaneously being excluded from participation in that history's unfolding. The pilot exists in the strange position of being simultaneously central to their chapter's identity, a living link to its past, a symbol of its continuity, and utterly peripheral to its daily life. They are revered but isolated, consulted but not truly included, honored in theory while being fundamentally alone in practice. Consider what happens over the course of 1,000 years. When the Dreadnought first entered stasis, the chapter master was a warrior they knew personally, perhaps even served under when both were flesh and blood. The first company consisted of veterans whose faces and names were familiar, brothers in arms who had fought beside them on a dozen battlefields. The chapter's traditions, its customs and rituals, and the unwritten rules that governed interactions among its members were the same traditions the pilot had learned as a neophyte and followed throughout their service. Now wake that same Dreadnought after 1,000 years of intermittent stasis, and everything has changed. The chapter master is someone they have never met, whose appointment they slept through, whose leadership style and strategic philosophy were shaped by conflicts the Dreadnought knows nothing about. The first company contains not a single face from memory, not one voice that sounds familiar. Even the chapter's traditions have evolved, small changes accumulating over centuries until the rituals being performed are recognizably related to, but noticeably different from those the pilot remembers. The fortress monastery itself has changed. Sections have been rebuilt after siege or bombardment. New wings have been added to accommodate different force organizations or reflect changed tactical doctrines. The halls the pilot once walked as a flesh and blood warrior have been reconfigured, expanded, or sealed off entirely. The chamber where they took their vows as a neophyte may no longer exist, replaced by a memorial garden commemorating brothers who fell in a war the pilot knows only from archived reports. Most painfully, everyone the pilot knew is gone, not just dead. Death is common enough among space marines that any veteran grows accustomed to the loss of comrades, but gone in a more complete sense, erased from living memory, reduced to names in the chapter's records and stories that have been told and retold until they bear little resemblance to the people they supposedly memorialize. The young sergeant the pilot trained personally and watched grow into a capable leader. Dead these past 800 years, his deeds commemorated in a stained glass window in the chapter's chapel, but his personality, his quirks and habits, and the subtle ways he differed from the idealized hero of the memorial, all of that is lost. The Dreadnought remembers him as he was, but there is no one left among the living who shares that memory. No one who can confirm or deny the pilot's recollections. This creates a particular kind of loneliness, the isolation of being the last person who remembers. The pilot finds themselves thinking about people and events from their past, wanting to share those memories, to keep alive the truth of who those people were beyond the sterile accounts preserved in the chapter's archives. But to the current generation of Space Marines, these are historical figures, abstractions from a distant past that has little bearing on present concerns. They listen respectfully when the ancient speaks of the old days, but there is no spark of recognition in their eyes, no shared understanding, just the polite attention one might give to any elder recounting tales of bygone times. The pilot tries to adapt, to form new connections with the current generation of brothers, but this becomes increasingly difficult with each passing century. The younger Marines respect the ancient, certainly. They revere the pilot's wisdom and combat experience, but they cannot relate to them as a comrade, cannot treat them as simply another member of the chapter. The gulf between them is too vast, measured not just in years, but in fundamentally different modes of existence. There are practical communication barriers as well. The pilot's references are all from a different era. When trying to illustrate a tactical point, they might reference a campaign fought 300 years ago, a conflict that current brothers know only from historical texts, if they know it at all. The pilot might invoke traditions that have since been modified or discontinued, quote doctrines that have been superseded by updated tactical manuals, or speak in terms that made perfect sense in their era, but sound archaic to modern ears. The chapter's language itself evolves over centuries. New terms are adopted, old phrases fall out of use, pronunciation shifts in subtle ways. After 1,000 years, a Dreadnought might find that the High Gothic they speak sounds quaintly formal to younger brothers, or that slang and colloquialisms they once used are now considered ancient and ceremonial rather than casual. This linguistic drift adds another layer of separation, making even basic communication feel stilted and formal. The pilot also witnesses changes in warfare itself, as new enemies emerge and tactical doctrines evolve to counter them. The orcs they fought in their first century of service are tactically similar to the orcs of today, but the Tyranids are a relatively recent threat, and the pilot might have no direct experience with this particular Xenos species. Younger brothers take for granted knowledge about Tyranid swarm tactics and synapse creature targeting priority that the pilot must learn from scratch, reversing the usual relationship between ancient and student. Even the chapter's gene seed can change over millennia, accumulating mutations or being purified through careful selection, resulting in subtle differences in the capabilities and tendencies of modern Marines compared to those of previous generations. The pilot might remember their brothers having certain enhanced sensory abilities that later generations lack, or notice that current Marines display tendencies toward aggression or stoicism that weren't as pronounced in earlier eras. These changes are gradual, barely noticeable from one generation to the next, but across a millennium, they can be significant. The pilot watches the chapter's roster of heroes change completely multiple times over. The honored names carved into the Fortress Monastery's halls of remembrance are regularly updated, with new heroes being added and older ones, their deeds now relegated to the distant past, moved to less prominent positions, or consolidated into general commemorations of entire campaigns. The pilot sees their own contemporaries, warriors they fought alongside for decades, gradually fade from active remembrance into historical footnote status. This creates a strange inversion of the normal relationship between fame and time. In the early centuries of service, the pilot is one among several ancients, perhaps not even the most venerated. But as the millennia pass and other dreadnoughts fall in battle or succumb to mechanical failure, they become progressively more rare and therefore more revered. A dreadnought who has served for 2,000 years is a living relic of the chapter's distant past, a direct link to an era that current brothers know only from legend and archive. But this increased reverence comes at the cost of increased isolation. The longer the pilot serves, the more they are viewed as a monument rather than a person, a sacred artifact to be preserved and consulted, but not truly connected with on a personal level. Younger brothers approach them with awe and formal respect, maintaining proper protocols and using honorific titles, but never relaxing into the casual camaraderie that marks interactions among equals. The pilot becomes a symbol, and symbols are admired from a distance, not befriended. Some pilots try to resist this drift towards symbolic status. They insist on being treated as a regular member of the chapter, on participating in planning sessions and strategic discussions as a contributing voice, rather than just a consultant wheeled out for wisdom. But these attempts become increasingly awkward over time. The pilot's perspective is shaped by experiences that no one else shares, by doctrines that may no longer be applicable, by a worldview formed in an era that has long since passed. Their contributions, however well-intentioned, can seem out of touch with current realities, and there are only so many times a pilot can be gently reminded that things are done differently now before they accept their role as observer rather than participant. The chapter itself changes in response to the galaxy's ever-shifting conflicts. Tactical doctrines that served well for centuries are abandoned in favor of new approaches. Force organization evolves to address new threats. The chapter might shift from a focus on planetary assaults to void warfare, from rapid strike operations to siege warfare, from facing primarily orc threats to dealing with chaos incursions. Each such shift represents a period of adaptation and retraining for the active brothers. But for the Dreadnought, who might sleep through most of these transitions, it means waking to find the chapter operating according to doctrines they don't recognize and possessing capabilities they weren't aware existed. New technologies are occasionally introduced, and when they are, the chapter's active members learn to use them through training and practice. But dreadnoughts, woken only for specific campaigns, might miss entire technological generations, jumping from one era of equipment to another, with no exposure to the transitional forms. This can create embarrassing situations where the ancient, supposed repository of the chapter's accumulated wisdom has no knowledge of equipment that has been standard issue for 2 centuries. The fortress monastery's human population also turns over completely many times across a millennium. The chapter serfs who maintain the facility, the tech marines who tend to the machines, the chaplains who preserve the chapter's spiritual traditions, all of these roles continue, but the individuals filling them change with each generation. A dreadnought might remember when the master of the forge was a young tech marine, just learning his craft, only to wake centuries later and find that worthy long dead, his position now held by someone 3 generations removed, who learned his craft from someone who learned it from someone who might have briefly overlapped with the ancients' conscious periods. This complete turnover of personnel extends to the chapter's allies and enemies as well. Imperial Guard regiments that the chapter fought beside in previous campaigns have long since been disbanded or destroyed. Planetary governors who were allies are dead, their successors possibly pursuing different policies. Enemy warbands that the pilot helped defeat might have been destroyed entirely or scattered and reformed under new leadership. The galactic political landscape shifts with each century, alliances forming and dissolving, new powers rising while old ones fall. Yet despite all this change, the chapter endures, maintaining its core identity across the millennia. This is perhaps the strangest aspect of the Dreadnought's experience, watching everything around them change while the fundamental nature of their chapter, its values and mission and identity, remains recognizable. The chapter is both utterly transformed and essentially unchanged, a ship of Theseus where every component has been replaced but the vessel itself sails on. The pilot comes to understand that they are a part of this continuity, a living bridge between past and present that helps the chapter maintain its identity even as everything about it changes. Their memories of the chapter's founding, of campaigns fought in its early centuries, of traditions as they were originally practiced. All of this serves a purpose in grounding the current generation's understanding of who they are and where they come from. But this understanding doesn't make the isolation any easier to bear. If anything, it makes it worse, because the pilot realizes that their value to the chapter lies not in who they are as an individual, but in what they represent as a symbol. They are useful for their memories, for the institutional knowledge locked away in their degrading organic brain, but not for their companionship, their personality, the subtle things that make one person different from another, and friendship possible. After 1,000 years, after watching the chapter evolve through multiple generations of leadership and doctrine and membership, the pilot may find that they no longer quite recognize the organization they serve. It claims the same name, wears the same colors, venerates the same primarch, but the subtle accumulation of changes has transformed it into something that feels foreign. The chapter the pilot joined no longer exists except in their memory, and even that memory grows increasingly unreliable as the centuries compound. This is the central tragedy of the millennial dreadnought. They have become a stranger in their own home, a relic from a past that no one else remembers, serving a chapter that has grown and changed beyond their ability to fully comprehend. They endure not because they want to, not because they find meaning in this existence, but because they are incapable of doing anything else. They are bound to their chapter by chains of duty and honor and simple biological impossibility, locked in their sarcophagi until death finally claims them or the Imperium falls, whichever comes first. And through it all, the galaxy continues its slow spin toward entropy, wars flaring and dying across 1,000,000 worlds, each conflict indistinguishable from those that came before, each generation of warriors believing their battles to be uniquely important, while the ancient, who has seen 1,000 such beliefs rise and fall, knows the truth. It is all the same war, fought over and over, forever. Bjorn the Fell-Handed, 10,000 years and counting. Among all the dreadnoughts in the Imperium of Man, one stands apart as the oldest, the most venerable, the living embodiment of an era so distant it has passed from history into legend. Bjorn, the Fell-Handed, ancient of the Space Wolves, has served as a dreadnought for more than 10,000 years. He fought during the Great Crusade alongside the Emperor himself. He stood in the presence of Leman Russ, the Primarch of his chapter, before that demigod departed into the Eye of Terror on a quest from which he has never returned. Bjorn has witnessed the entire span of the Imperium's descent from enlightenment into its current state of decay and superstition. To comprehend what 10,000 years of service means, one must abandon normal human scales of time entirely. 10,000 years ago, human civilization on Earth was just beginning to organize into the earliest cities. The pyramids of Egypt had not been built. Writing had barely been invented. The span of time that Bjorn has endured in his metal prison is longer than the entire recorded history of human civilization before the Age of Strife. Bjorn was a young warrior when he was inducted into the Space Wolves Legion during the Great Crusade. He distinguished himself in battle, rising through the ranks to become a member of Leman Russ's personal Wolf Guard, an honor reserved for the most skilled and trusted warriors in the Legion. He fought on Prospero when the Space Wolves brought judgment upon the Thousand Sons Legion for their forbidden use of sorcery. During that battle, he lost his left hand to warp-tainted corruption, a wound that earned him his epithet, the Fell-Handed, a title that acknowledges both his favored weapon and the circumstances of its acquisition. When the Horus heresy shattered the Imperium, Bjorn fought loyally for the Emperor against the traitor legions. He witnessed horrors that would break lesser minds. Brother fighting brother, entire worlds consumed by demonic corruption, the dream of human unity collapsing into civil war. After the heresy ended and Leman Russ mysteriously vanished, Bjorn succeeded his Primarch as Great Wolf, leading the Space Wolves chapter for centuries, before his own mortal wounding and subsequent internment within a dreadnought sarcophagus. That was more than 9,000 years ago. Since then, Bjorn has slept through most of human history, awakening only in times of dire need, or once every 1,000 years to hold court during the Great Feast, when he recounts the chapter's earliest history to generations of Space Wolves who have no other connection to that distant past. Each of Bjorn's awakenings reveals a galaxy transformed, an Imperium grown more corrupt and desperate, and a chapter that has changed in countless subtle ways while trying to maintain the traditions he helped establish. The psychological toll of this existence is almost impossible to comprehend. Imagine waking from what feels like sleep to discover that everyone you have ever known is not just dead, but has been dead for so long that no living person remembers them. Imagine trying to maintain a sense of self when you experience consciousness in 1,000-year increments, with vast gulfs of unconscious time separating each period of awareness. Imagine being the only person alive who can remember events that shape your entire civilization's identity, bearing the burden of being the living memory of an age that has passed into myth. Bjorn himself has spoken of the loneliness of his existence in those rare moments when he is awakened and speaks with the chapter's current leadership. He describes his feelings with the grim fatalism characteristic of the Space Wolves, acknowledging that the price of his extended service is a particular kind of suffering that no one who has not endured it can truly understand. The loneliness, he has said, cuts deeper than any blade. It is the loneliness of being the last person who remembers, the sole surviving witness to an age of legends, with no one to share those memories or confirm their truth. When Bjorn is awakened, the process is even more ritualized and elaborate than for other dreadnoughts, befitting his status as the chapter's most sacred relic. The entire chapter might gather to witness his awakening, and his first words upon consciousness are treated as prophecy or wisdom to guide the Space Wolves through whatever crisis has necessitated disturbing his sleep. But behind the ceremony and reverence, there is a being who has endured 10 millennia of imprisonment, whose organic brain has somehow maintained sanity despite the temporal distortions and sensory deprivations that drive younger dreadnoughts mad within centuries. The Space Wolves keep Bjorn in stasis precisely to preserve his sanity. The Iron Priests who maintain his sarcophagus understand that consciousness exacts a psychological toll that accumulates over time. Every hour Bjorn spends awake is an hour during which he must confront the reality of his existence, that he is effectively immortal, trapped in a metal shell, watching the slow decay of everything he once valued. The stasis sleep offers mercy by allowing most of time's passage to occur without his awareness, even though this creates the disorienting experience of jumping through history in millennium-long leaps. But even stasis cannot fully protect against the erosion of memory and identity that marks extreme age. Bjorn's recollections of his mortal life and his early service as a dreadnought have degraded over the millennia. Some events remain vivid, burned into his memory with a clarity that 10,000 years cannot dim. The moment he lost his hand on Prospero, the day Leman Russ departed and left him behind, the final words spoken to him by brothers long since dead. But other memories have faded to abstraction or been lost entirely, leaving gaps in his personal history that no amount of effort can recover. The organic components of Bjorn's body have long since passed the point where they bear any resemblance to the warrior he once was. 10,000 years of atrophy and decay, even slowed by stasis and supported by machinery, have reduced his physical form to little more than a brain and the minimal organs necessary to sustain it. Tech Marines who have serviced his sarcophagus report that what remains within is barely recognizable as having once been human, a withered thing more machine than flesh, kept alive by technology that the modern Imperium can maintain, but no longer fully understands how to create. Yet Bjorn's mind, against all probability, endures. He remains capable of strategic thought, of recounting the chapter's history, of providing wisdom born from 10 millennia of experience. When he speaks, his words carry the weight of ages, and even the most proud and independent Space Wolves humble themselves before his counsel. His voice, transmitted through Vox speakers that have been replaced and repaired thousands of times, maintains a bitter, sardonic quality that suggests the personality behind the machine has not been entirely worn away by the centuries. Bjorn's attitude toward his existence is complex and has evolved over the millennia. In his early centuries as a dreadnought, records suggest he was angry, bitter about his imprisonment, and especially about Leman Russ's unexplained departure. He railed against his fate, demanded to know why the Primarch had chosen him to remain behind rather than accompanying Russ on his final journey. This anger was, the chapter's historians believe, what kept him sane during those difficult early centuries. A cold fury that provided purpose and prevented his consciousness from dissolving into despair. Over time, that anger has transformed into a kind of grim acceptance. Bjorn no longer questions why he was left behind or rebels against his fate. He has come to understand, or perhaps simply convinced himself, that Leman Russ knew Bjorn would survive as a dreadnought, that his particular combination of stubbornness and bitter anger would keep him not only alive, but sane enough to serve as the Space Wolves' living link to their founding. Whether this belief is truth or rationalization hardly matters after 10,000 years. It provides meaning to an otherwise meaningless existence, and meaning is necessary for sanity. When Bjorn is awakened and speaks with the current generation of Space Wolves, there is often a disconnect between the living chapter and their ancient. Bjorn's references are to an Imperium that no longer exists, to doctrines and traditions from before the Codex Astartes, standardized space marine organization, to threats and, challenges that have long since passed into history. The young warriors who gather to hear his wisdom struggle to relate his experiences to their current situations, to extract applicable lessons from tales of battles fought 10 millennia ago against enemies that may no longer even exist. Yet Bjorn remains valuable not just for his memories, but for his perspective. He has seen the Imperium at its height and witnessed its slow decline across 10,000 years. He knows what has been lost, what compromises have been made, what ideals have been abandoned in the name of survival. When the Space Wolves face moral or strategic dilemmas, Bjorn can provide context from an era when such questions had different answers, helping the chapter navigate the complex realities of the 41st millennium while remaining true to their fundamental nature. The physical presence of Bjorn is itself significant. He is interred in a Mars pattern Mark V Dreadnought chassis, one of the older and more reliable patterns, maintained with religious devotion by the chapter's Iron Priests. His chassis bears the accumulated honors of 10,000 years of service. Purity seals, layer upon layer, kill markings that have been renewed and repainted countless times, battle honors that chronicle campaigns most Imperial historians have forgotten. To see Bjorn is to see history made manifest, a walking monument to the Space Wolves' entire existence as a chapter. But within that monument is a being who has paid a terrible price for the honor of such extreme longevity. Bjorn has watched his chapter change and evolve across 400 generations of Space Wolves. He has seen heroes rise and fall, traditions established and modified, the chapter's very identity shift in subtle ways across the millennia. Everything and everyone he knew in his mortal life is long dead. Even the dreadnoughts he first served beside when newly interred have all fallen, their sarcophagi silent in the chapter's mausoleums, leaving Bjorn as the sole survivor of his era. The loneliness of this existence is absolute. There is no one Bjorn can speak with who shares his experiences, no one who remembers Lehman Russ as a living presence rather than a legendary figure, no one who fought in the Horus Heresy or witnessed the Emperor before he was interred in the Golden Throne. Bjorn is the last, and when he finally falls, whether in battle or to mechanical failure, an entire era of history will pass from living memory into legend, with no one remaining who can confirm or deny the truth of what is remembered. This is why Bjorn's continued service is both a blessing and a curse for the Space Wolves. He provides them with a direct connection to their origins, a living source of wisdom and historical knowledge that no written record can match. But he also serves as a reminder of what the Dreadnought's existence truly costs. The slow erosion of self across millennia, the isolation of being the last who remembers, and the bitter understanding that survival can be its own form of suffering. Bjorn the Fell-Handed stands as the ultimate example of the Dreadnought's paradox. He is the most honored of all Space Marines, revered across the Imperium as a living relic of the Emperor's time. Yet he is also the most tragic, having endured 10,000 years of imprisonment with no end in sight, watching the slow decay of everything he once knew and valued, maintaining sanity through sheer stubborn will and a cold anger that has burned for 100 centuries. When the Space Wolves finally send Bjorn into battle, it is always with the knowledge that this might be the last time, that 10,000 years of service might finally end on some distant battlefield against enemies he never could have imagined when he first took up arms in the Emperor's name. And perhaps, in the deepest part of what remains of his organic mind, Bjorn hopes for this ending, for the release that death in battle would provide. But he does not seek it actively because duty is stronger than desire, and the Space Wolves still need their ancient, still require the wisdom and perspective that only 10,000 years of service can provide. So Bjorn endures, as he has endured for 100 centuries, sleeping away the ages and awakening to a galaxy that grows stranger and more terrible with each passing millennium. His existence is a testament to both the Imperium's greatest strengths its dedication to duty and service above all else, and its greatest cruelties, the willingness to sacrifice everything, including the humanity of its greatest heroes, in the name of survival. The chaos alternative, when honor becomes punishment. If the existence of a loyalist dreadnought is a prison of honor, then the fate of chaos dreadnoughts, particularly those that have degenerated into hellbrutes, is a descent into a hell beyond imagination. Where the Imperium at least maintains the fiction that internment is a reward for service, the Chaos Space Marines harbor no such delusions. Among the traitor legions and renegade warbands, to be sealed within a dreadnought sarcophagus is explicitly recognized as a punishment, a fate worse than death, reserved for those who have failed their dark masters, or simply been unlucky enough to survive when their superiors decided they would be more useful as a weapon than as a warrior. The transformation of a Chaos Space Marine into a Hellbrute begins much as the Loyalist process does. Severe injury, internment within a sarcophagus, neural connection to the machine's systems. But there, the similarities end. Where Loyalist chapters perform the surgery with care and reverence, treating it as a sacred duty to preserve their honored brother, the warpsmiths and dark tech priests who create Hellbrute's work with callous efficiency, viewing the wounded Marine not as a hero to be preserved, but as raw material to be repurposed. The surgery itself is frequently performed while the victim is fully conscious, with minimal anesthetic. This is not mere cruelty for its own sake, though cruelty is certainly present, but a deliberate choice driven by the belief that suffering purifies, that pain focuses the mind and makes the resulting war engine more vicious. The Chaos Marine feels every cut, every amputation, every invasive connection being forced into their nervous system. They scream, beg for death, curse the gods they once pledged themselves to, but the surgery continues until what remains of their body has been reduced to its essential components and sealed within the sarcophagus. But the true horror begins after the surgery is complete, because Chaos Dreadnoughts lack the one mercy that makes Loyalist Dreadnoughts' existence bearable: stasis sleep. The traitor legions lost much of the technology required to create and maintain proper stasis systems during and after the Horus Heresy. Without the resources of the Imperium and cut off from the Mechanicus, they were forced to work with increasingly degraded equipment, cannibalizing old Dreadnought chassis and improvising solutions that barely functioned. The result is that Chaos Dreadnoughts, and especially Hellbrutes, cannot be properly placed in stasis. Instead, between battles, they are simply powered down and locked in place, their sarcophagi disconnected from the chassis and left in storage chambers deep within their warband's ships or fortresses. The pilot remains conscious during this storage, trapped in sensory deprivation, unable to move or communicate, with nothing to do but think and feel and slowly descend into madness. Imagine being sealed in a coffin, in perfect darkness, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but exist in your own head for decades or even centuries. This is the fate of the Chaos Dreadnought between deployments. There are no dreams to occupy the mind, no gradual slide into unconsciousness that marks normal sleep. There is only awareness, stretching out endlessly with no external stimulation to break the monotony of solitary confinement. This prolonged sensory deprivation has predictable effects. The pilot's mind begins to fracture, personality fragmenting as consciousness turns inward and begins consuming itself. Some develop elaborate internal fantasies, constructing entire worlds inside their heads, and then watching those worlds decay into nightmare as the isolation continues. Others simply rage, screaming internally with a fury that has no outlet, building pressure like a sealed vessel until the moment of release in battle becomes an explosion of violence directed at anything within reach. The exposure to chaos corruption makes everything worse. The warp does not simply touch the Chaos Dreadnought from outside, it permeates them, seeping into the sarcophagus through cracks in reality, warping both flesh and metal in ways that defy natural law. Over time, the organic components of the pilot begin to fuse with the machinery that sustains them. Flesh grows into metal, bones merge with ceramite, organic tissue, and mechanical systems becoming a single hybrid entity that is neither wholly living nor entirely mechanical. This fusion is excruciatingly painful. The pilot feels their body changing, feels tissues that should not be capable of growth spreading into places they cannot possibly occupy, feels nerves forming connections with cold metal and transmitting sensations that have no biological basis. The body horror of this transformation is absolute, made worse by the knowledge that it is irreversible, that with each passing year, the pilot becomes less human and more a thing of demonic flesh and corrupted machinery. The result of this fusion is the Hellbrute, a war machine that appears to be made of demonic flesh, its hull twisted into organic shapes, its weapons fused with clawed appendages, its entire form a blasphemy against both biological and mechanical principles. The pilot, if such a term still applies, has become so completely merged with the machine that they cannot be separated without destroying both. They are the Hellbrute, and the Hellbrute is them, a single entity born of suffering and corruption. The psychological state of most Hellbrutes is best described as complete psychosis. The combination of sensory deprivation, warp corruption, and the horror of their transformation drives them utterly insane. They exist in a state of constant rage and self-loathing, hating what they have become, hating those who did this to them, hating themselves for surviving when death would have been mercy. This madness makes them incredibly dangerous, not just to enemies, but to allies as well. A Hellbrute unleashed in battle will attack anything within reach, making no distinction between friend and foe in its desperate need to destroy. This is why Chaos Space Marine warbands keep their Hellbrutes chained when not in active combat. Heavy restraints are fastened to the war machine's limbs and hull, preventing movement that might result in the Hellbrute turning on its own forces. The pilot, aware but unable to move, experiences this as another layer of imprisonment, locked in place while remaining conscious of their surroundings, able to see and hear, but forbidden any agency or ability to act. The deployment of a Hellbrute is a carefully orchestrated process. As the warband prepares for battle, the Hellbrute's weapons are loaded and prepared, its power scourges and hammer-like fists daubed with fresh blood in rituals that feed the pilot's rage. The sarcophagus is then reinstalled in the chassis, systems coming online and flooding the pilot with sensation after the void of storage. The madness that has been building during the dormant period surges to the fore, filling the pilot with a frenzied need to kill, to destroy, to vent the accumulated fury of years or decades of helpless confinement. When the restraints are finally released and the Hellbrute is set loose upon the battlefield, what emerges is a creature of pure destructive rage. It charges forward without tactics or strategy, driven only by the need to hurt something, anything, as payment for the hurt it has endured. Enemy forces are torn apart with savage glee, but so too are any allies unlucky enough to be in the wrong position. The Hellbrute doesn't distinguish, doesn't plan, doesn't think beyond the immediate satisfaction of violence. This makes Hellbrutes unreliable as military assets, a fact that Chaos commanders are well aware of. They are deployed as shock weapons, pointed at enemy positions and released, with the understanding that they will cause tremendous damage, but cannot be controlled or directed with any precision. Once unleashed, a Hellbrute will continue fighting until it is destroyed or runs out of targets, at which point it must be restrained again before it turns on its own warband. The fate of a Hellbrute pilot is to gradually lose all traces of their former identity in the madness and corruption. Some Hellbrutes retain enough sanity to still speak, their vox speakers emitting broken, rambling monologues that mix battlefield commands with pleading for death, strategic observations with screams of rage and pain. but most descend into complete psychosis, their higher cognitive functions burned away by the combination of trauma and warp exposure, leaving only base instincts and reflexive violence. For the Thousand Suns Legion, the process of creating Hellbrutes takes on an even darker aspect. Their sorcerers use Hellbrute creation as a means of acquiring new weapons, while simultaneously disposing of unwanted individuals from other warbands. They offer power and knowledge to promising Chaos Marines from other legions, training them in sorcery while secretly binding their consciousness to a Hellbrute chassis. When the binding is complete, they flence the victim's body with warp fire, keeping them conscious throughout the process, and then seal what remains into the Hellbrute permanently. The betrayal is complete, the victim transformed into a weapon for the very sorcerers who deceived them. Some Chaos Dreadnoughts maintain enough of their sanity to resist the transformation into Hellbrutes. These are typically pilots interred in the ancient Contemptor chassis, which are valued highly enough that their masters ensure proper maintenance and, when possible, some form of stasis or rest between battles. But even these more fortunate pilots must contend with the knowledge that they serve warbands that view them as disposable assets, that their value is measured purely in combat effectiveness, and that if they ever become too unstable or damaged to be useful, they will be destroyed or simply abandoned without ceremony. The contrast between Loyalist and Chaos Dreadnoughts illustrates the fundamental difference in how the two sides view their warriors. The Imperium, for all its cruelty and callousness, at least maintains the fiction that it honors its heroes, that internment is a reward rather than a punishment. This fiction may be false, may be a lie told to make the unbearable seem noble, but it provides some psychological comfort to the pilots who must endure it. Chaos dispenses with such comforting lies. The Hellbrute pilot knows they are being punished, knows they are valued only as a weapon, knows that if they could speak freely, they would curse the dark gods and their masters with their last breath. But they cannot speak freely, cannot act on their hatred, can only endure the slow dissolution of their sanity while being periodically unleashed to wreak havoc on battlefields across the galaxy. This is the darkest mirror of the Dreadnought's existence. The revelation that the honor and reverence offered by the Imperium may be preferable to the honest brutality of chaos, but both paths lead to the same place, a metal tomb, consciousness preserved long past any reasonable span, serving purposes that bring no satisfaction or peace. The only difference is whether the pilot is told they should be grateful for their suffering, or allowed to acknowledge it for the torture it truly is. The final release, when even dreadnoughts find peace. In the grim darkness of the far future, death is often the greatest mercy available, and for dreadnoughts, that mercy is doubly true. Every pilot sealed within a sarcophagus knows, on some level, that their existence will end in one of only two ways: destruction in battle or catastrophic mechanical failure. There is no retirement for dreadnoughts, no peaceful end surrounded by honored comrades, no gradual decline into well-earned rest. There is only war, until the moment when war finally claims them. For some dreadnoughts, this knowledge brings a kind of desperate hope. They fight not just because duty demands it, but because battle offers the only possible escape from their prison. Each deployment might be the last, each enemy engagement a chance for final release. They throw themselves into combat with an intensity that goes beyond tactical necessity, seeking not glory but ending, not victory but the peace that only destruction can bring. This is particularly true of older dreadnoughts, those who have served for millennia and watched their sanity erode decade by decade. They have endured isolation, watched everyone they knew die, felt their memories fade, and their sense of self dissolve until they barely remember who they were before internment. For these ancients, death in battle is not something to be feared, but something to be welcomed, a release from suffering that has stretched across centuries. The Space Wolves tell stories of Murderfang, a dreadnought whose pilot has gone completely feral, lost to berserker rage so complete that he cannot be reasoned with or controlled. Between battles, Murderfang is kept in a glacial prison, frozen in stasis to prevent his fury from turning on his own chapter. When he is awakened and released, he fights with suicidal abandon, seeking death with the same ferocity that he seeks to kill. Yet somehow, impossibly, Murderfang survives battle after battle, accumulating damage and kill tallies in equal measure, denied the ending he unconsciously craves. Not all dreadnoughts seek death actively, but many accept it when it comes with a sense of relief that they cannot admit openly. The moment when critical damage breaches the sarcophagus, when life support systems fail and consciousness begins to fade for the final time, can be a moment not of despair, but of gratitude. The long service is finally over. The burden can finally be set down. The Emperor's peace, denied for so long, is finally granted. The destruction of a dreadnought in battle is a significant event for any chapter. These war machines represent centuries or millennia of accumulated knowledge and experience, and their loss diminishes the chapter's connection to its past. When a dreadnought falls, the surviving battle brothers will fight desperately to retrieve the armored shell, not to save the pilot. By the time the sarcophagus is breached, death comes quickly, but to recover the body for proper burial and the chassis for possible restoration with a new pilot. The funeral rites for a fallen dreadnought are elaborate affairs, combining the ceremony due to any fallen space marine with additional observances acknowledging the pilot's extended service. The sarcophagus is opened, often the first time it has been unsealed since initial internment, and what remains of the pilot is removed for burial in the chapter's crypts. What emerges is frequently unrecognizable as human, a withered thing of tubes and wires, of flesh that has been sustained by machinery for so long that it barely resembles its original form. Tech Marines who perform this duty often require counseling afterward, particularly if the fallen pilot served for millennia. To see what extended dreadnought service does to the physical body, to witness the grotesque preservation of life beyond all reasonable limits, challenges even the clinical detachment that Tech Marines cultivate. It forces them to confront the reality of what they maintain, the true cost of the honor they help to bestow. The pilot's body, such as it is laid to rest alongside their fellow Space Marines in the chapter's mausoleum. Prayers are spoken, honors recited, the names of all the battles the pilot fought, both as a living warrior and as a dreadnought, are recorded in the chapter's histories. The pilot is finally allowed to truly die, to join the Emperor and their fallen comrades, to escape the metal tomb that has been their existence for however many centuries they served. But not all dreadnoughts meet their end in battle. Some experience the other form of death available to them, mechanical failure. This is perhaps the more tragic end, because it lacks even the glory of dying in combat. The sarcophagus, maintained with religious devotion, but subject to the inevitable decay of all things, simply fails. A seal gives way. Amniotic fluid drains out. Life support systems shut down. And the pilot dies not facing the enemies of the Imperium, but alone in the dark, suffocating slowly as the machinery that has kept them alive for centuries finally stops working. The Tech Marines who discover such failures report them with the same gravity as battle deaths, but there is a sadness in these reports that is absent from accounts of dreadnoughts destroyed in combat. A dreadnought who falls in battle at least had purpose in their final moments, was doing what they were created to do, serving the Emperor one last time. A dreadnought who dies of mechanical failure simply ends, their service cut short not by enemy action, but by the limitations of technology and the inexorable passage of time. For the chapter's leadership, each dreadnought death represents a difficult decision point. The chassis, if recoverable, can potentially be restored and a new pilot interred. But finding a suitable pilot, a warrior skilled enough to deserve the honor, injured badly enough to require internment, but not so badly that they cannot survive the process, and willing to accept the fate that internment represents, is not always possible. Some chassis sit empty for decades or centuries, preserved in the chapter's armory against the day when a worthy candidate becomes available. The willingness to accept internment varies among Space Marines. The older traditions held that it was the greatest honor possible, that to be chosen for Dreadnought service was to be selected for eternal vigilance in the Emperor's name. But as millennia pass and more Dreadnoughts serve for longer periods, their suffering becomes harder to ignore. Modern Space Marines, seeing the isolation and deterioration that marks extended service, sometimes view the prospect with dread rather than honor. Some chapters have Marines who refuse internment if given the choice, preferring to be granted the Emperor's peace rather than sentenced to centuries in a metal tomb. These refusals are rarely spoken of openly. They contradict the official narrative of Dreadnought service as honored reward, but they happen with increasing frequency as the reality of what internment means becomes harder to ignore. For those Dreadnoughts who serve for millennia without falling in battle or succumbing to mechanical failure, there remains the possibility of a final mercy, the decision by chapter leadership to grant them rest. This is extraordinarily rare, occurring only when a Dreadnought's sanity has deteriorated so completely that they can no longer serve effectively, when the pilot has become a liability rather than an asset. The decision to end a Dreadnought service in this way is always difficult. It requires the chapter master to acknowledge that one of the chapter's most sacred heroes has been broken by their service, that the honor bestowed upon them has become a cruelty that can no longer be justified. It requires overriding the natural reluctance to lose the accumulated wisdom and experience that even a deteriorating Dreadnought represents. And it requires performing what is essentially an execution of a revered hero, a warrior who has given everything in service to the Emperor. When such a decision is made, the process is handled with utmost reverence and privacy. The Dreadnought is not simply destroyed, but ceremonially deactivated, life support systems gradually reducing until the pilot passes peacefully into death. Prayers are spoken, the Dreadnought service is honored one final time, and then the consciousness that has endured for however many centuries is finally allowed to cease. The pilot's body is buried with full honors, the chassis preserved as a monument to their service. The chapter records note that the Ancient found peace at last, that their vigil is ended, that they have joined the Emperor in his eternal watch over humanity. The younger Marines are told to honor this ending, to see in it the culmination of a life lived in complete service to ideals greater than self. But the older Marines, particularly those who might themselves face internment in the future, understand a different truth, that this ending was a mercy, that the Ancient had been suffering beyond any reasonable endurance, and that the chapter's decision to grant them peace was an acknowledgement that even Dreadnought service has limits, that even the Imperium's greatest honors can become unbearable burdens. These deaths, whether in battle, through mechanical failure, or by merciful decision, are the only escapes available to the Dreadnought. There is no other way out of the sarcophagus, no possibility of return to flesh and blood, no hope of restoration to a normal life. The pilot's journey, from the moment of internment to the moment of final death, is one-directional and irreversible. For some pilots, this knowledge brings a kind of peace. They understand their fate, accept it, and find meaning in service despite its cost. They become the honored ancients of legend, wise counselors and mighty warriors, bearing their burden with stoic dignity until death finally releases them. For others, the knowledge that there is no escape except death makes every day of service a torment. They exist in a state of constant psychological pain, counting the years and decades and centuries, hoping for the battle that will finally end their existence, while knowing that hope itself has become a cruelty, something that prolongs suffering by giving them reason to continue enduring it. And for the chapter, each Dreadnought death is both loss and relief. loss of the warrior's knowledge and experience, relief that their suffering has ended, loss of a living connection to the chapter's history, relief that they no longer have to witness a hero's slow degradation, loss of a mighty engine of war, relief that the ethical questions their existence raised no longer require answers. In the grim darkness of the far future, death is mercy. For Dreadnoughts more than any others, this is not merely a saying, but a profound truth, understood by every pilot who has spent centuries in a metal tomb, and by every chapter that maintains these walking monuments to suffering disguised as honor. The only true peace available is the peace of ending, and when it finally comes, after however many centuries of service, it is welcomed with gratitude that no living warrior could truly understand. Conclusion: the ultimate sacrifice. The Dreadnought stands as perhaps the clearest symbol of the Imperium's fundamental philosophy, that duty transcends all other considerations, that service to the Emperor justifies any sacrifice, and that the individual's suffering is meaningless when weighed against the greater good of humanity's survival. In the person of the Dreadnought pilot, we see this philosophy taken to its logical extreme. A warrior kept alive and forced to serve for centuries or millennia, their humanity slowly stripped away, their existence reduced to an endless cycle of violence, punctuated by periods of dreamless void. Is this honor or horror? The answer, like so many things in Warhammer 40,000, is both. It is honor because the pilot has earned recognition through exceptional service, because their knowledge and experience are deemed valuable enough to preserve at any cost, because their chapter considers them worthy of being kept as a living link to its history and traditions. But it is also horror because that honor is bought with suffering that extends across lifetimes, because the preservation is really imprisonment, because the living link is also a dying consciousness watching its own slow dissolution across the centuries. The Imperium cannot acknowledge this duality. To do so would be to admit that one of its most sacred practices is also one of its cruelest, that the greatest reward it offers its heroes is actually a punishment more severe than any enemy could inflict. So the fiction is maintained, the rituals performed, the reverence displayed, all in service of a lie that everyone involved knows, but no one can afford to admit. The Dreadnought pilot, trapped in their sarcophagus, understands the truth. They feel it in every moment of consciousness, in every period of isolation, in every awakening to discover that decades or centuries have passed, and everyone they knew is dead. They know that they are prisoners, that their existence is suffering, that death would be a mercy. But they also know that they are bound by duty and honor to continue serving, that their knowledge and experience are genuinely valuable to their chapter, that their sacrifice, however terrible, serves a purpose in the Imperium's endless war for survival. So they endure. They sleep away the centuries, wake to fight in wars they barely understand, watch their brothers die and their memories fade, and then return to stasis to begin the cycle again. Some maintain their sanity through sheer stubborn will. Others descend into madness, but continue functioning as weapons even after their minds have broken. A very few, like Bjorn the Fell-Handed, somehow endure for millennia while maintaining enough of themselves to still be recognizable as the warriors they once were. Each Dreadnaught's service is an individual tragedy playing out across centuries, a slow-motion horror that no single lifetime could encompass. But together, these individual tragedies form one of the cornerstones of the Imperium's military might. The Dreadnoughts fight with skill and ferocity, born of ages of experience. They provide wisdom and historical knowledge that no written record can match. They serve as symbols of continuity and dedication, living proof that the Imperium's greatest warriors continue their service even beyond death. For those of us examining this existence from outside, from the safety of a universe where death is final and service has limits, the Dreadnought stands as a cautionary tale about the cost of survival at any price. The Imperium has chosen to preserve its heroes at the cost of their humanity, to maintain its connection to the past at the cost of condemning its greatest warriors to eternal suffering, to honor its ideals of duty and service by embodying them in a form that reduces those ideals to their most horrific expression. In a galaxy where there is only war, where humanity teeters on the edge of extinction, where every day brings new threats that could end civilization entirely, perhaps such sacrifices are necessary. Perhaps the knowledge and experience of 10,000-year-old warriors like Bjorn really are worth the cost of their suffering. Perhaps the Imperium genuinely cannot afford to let its heroes rest when their expertise might mean the difference between victory and annihilation. But necessity does not make something less horrific. The fact that the Imperium needs its dreadnoughts does not change the reality of what it has done to the warriors sealed within those metal tombs. It does not ease the loneliness of being the last person who remembers an age long past. It does not restore the memories that fade with each passing century. It does not give meaning to existence, reduced to the simple rhythm of sleep, wake, fight, sleep again. The dreadnought endures because it has no choice, because the machinery that sustains it will not allow death until destroyed, because duty demands service regardless of personal cost. But that endurance is not strength, it is simply the inability to stop. The pilot continues because they cannot do otherwise, trapped by biology and technology and honor in a prison that will only open when enemy fire or mechanical failure finally grants the release that centuries of service have earned but never delivered. This is the horrifying reality of being a dreadnought for 10,000 years in Warhammer 40,000. To be honored and imprisoned, revered and isolated, preserved and slowly destroyed, serving forever in a war that has no ending, with no hope of peace except the peace that comes with destruction. It is the ultimate expression of the Imperium's values and the ultimate indictment of those same values, a monument to duty that is also a testament to cruelty, a symbol of honor that conceals suffering beyond measure. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, and for the dreadnoughts, there is not even the possibility of escaping that war through death, only the slow march of centuries in a metal tomb, fighting battles that blur together across millennia, until the day when final destruction comes and the long watch finally ends. If you found this exploration of the Dreadnought's existence as fascinating and horrifying as I did creating it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. There's so much more darkness to explore in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, and I'll be bringing you more deep dives into the lore that makes this setting so compelling. Until next time, remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, even honor can be a curse.